All right, so school is back in town when it comes to DC, learning about blockchain, but also learning about use cases. Polygon has made their trip to the Capitol and is attempting to try to do something to at least educate our lawmakers. And part of this is going to, I think, at least put the gauntlet down as to how and what the US Senate and Congress is going to do about blockchain and a lot of the regulation that's going to apply around this. This is going to be a deep one. My name is Paul Barrow. Welcome back into Tech Path. This is a hearing that was done by the Energy and Commerce chair. And the idea behind it was pretty straightforward. They were going to do some testimony from Polygon mostly. These were the people that were going to be there. This is Carla Reyes, professor of law at the Debna School of Law. You also have Sudler there, a professor and a chief executive officer of Villanova. And then Ryan Wyatt, which is the president of Polygon Labs. You guys have probably seen us talk a lot about Ryan before. And we've had Polygon Labs and Polygon on multiple times. But the point on this is I want to jump into a series of clips, again, from this hearing that will give you an idea of how and what these blockchain projects are having to do to educate our lawmakers. So let's start here with clip one.
Today's hearing will highlight that blockchains are not just impacting Wall Street, but are also changing Silicon Valley and the internet as a whole. It is essential that Congress accurately understand what it is regulating before it does so. That would be nice.
So here's the title of this hearing. Building, let's see, what is it? Building blockchains, exploring Web3, and other applications for directed ledger technology. Pretty wonky, I would say, but good for us that we're heading into this territory.
So I entirely agree that if you were to Google it, you get an alphabet soup of words that's difficult to understand. Indeed, I have a series of papers looking at how different constituents in the ecosystem talk about the technology themselves and noting that they often talk past each other. The technical experts use different words, the lawyers do use different words, et cetera. But so you're absolutely not wrong.
All right, so the good thing here is that at least the lawmakers are trying. They're trying to attempt to understand this. Listen, this is normal that on any new technology, when they started to write Section 230, it had a lot of the same kind of scenario. This is basically the law of the internet and how IP would be constructed. This, I think, is very important, though, because we are going to see a roster of people that are going to help educate not only lawmakers, but also hopefully the new lawmakers coming in, which is more important than any of this. Let's go to clip two, which is the categories of use case that they're breaking down.
In my coursework, I developed a framework that helps my students and other practitioners of blockchain understand the categories of use cases for blockchain technology. And it's called the APPS framework, APPS. It's fairly easy to remember, APPS. And what it stands for is asset management, payments, public records, and supply chain management. The A for asset management is essentially representing something physical or digital with a token. We more commonly know that as NFTs. For payments, it's all started with payments with Bitcoin, so we're very familiar with that use case. With public records, it's essentially committing data to the blockchain, which could be public in nature, such as birth certificates and so forth, but doing so immutably, so no one can tamper with it. And finally, supply chain management, we've discussed here at length, looking at an.
All right, so at least they have an acronym for it. I mean, and I would say that's somewhat accurate. And breaking it down to a very basic minimum is the good thing that we have to do here, I think, for a lot of our lawmakers. Let's go to clip four, because this gets into national security. Actually, let's go to clip three, because this is where Ryan Wyatt comes in with Polygon and starts to break some things down. Look at him. He's got his glasses on. He's got a suit.
Over the past 4 decades, the internet has been built primarily by large, centralized corporations. This means that large corporations who control these sites and apps accrue the value of our time, our data, and our money, and it leaves the average user at a disadvantage. Today, online identities are stored in silos within company databases. This is how these companies create value for themselves, by wielding the data for their own benefit and only sharing the least amount of value to users to ensure continued use. Due to the way blockchains work, without intermediaries, users can connect to Web3 applications through their own personal software and decide when, how, and whether to share any information about themselves. The new Web3 applications being built on Polygon Network are not only created by startup software developers, but also by a number of other actors who are familiar to us, such as large American brands like Nike, Starbucks, Coca-Cola, the National Football League, and even UNICEF for making its various forms of aid relief more efficient, expedient, and transparent. And that is just to name a few.
I know that you referenced zero knowledge proofs in your testimony. Would you explain the concepts of that and how it can coexist?
Yes, without getting too highly technical on the concept, you're right. One of the things that we tout often here is the transparency of the blockchain. That is true. There's a lot that you can do with it, and that isn't the beauty of it. But I think without having the ability to have more ownership over your privacy, that can, have its own shortcomings. And so what zero knowledge does is effectively let you have the best of both worlds. You can have the transparency of the blockchain, but you can self-select as an individual what you want to share with any of these applications that you're interacting with. And zero knowledge allows that ability to happen through cryptography in a trusted way.
All right, I think Ryan explained that pretty basic and pretty easy for them to understand. And it starts to put things really in a much more of a bipartisan position between it. There's no left or right here. This is something that essentially is going to move the United States maybe to the next level. Listen, we're going to be doing these kinds of hearings probably in about 18 to 24 months on AI. Right now, blockchain is on the front of the burner because it's, a decade old, more. And I think now finally we're getting into the real possibility of regulation. Let's go again to the next clip, which is talking about national security. This is where it gets interesting.
My company in particular is working on building technologies that will put blockchain on space satellites, extending it beyond the Earth's surface. But to the point of why this would be important for our security is that the movement of satellites in general is moving from having individual satellites performing a mission or some operation to having constellations of satellites that are able to talk to one another. This creates greater resiliency, particularly in the light of any type of cyber attack that may happen by our adversaries against any of our satellites. In a blockchain network, if one of our satellites is lost, that's not a problem because the other satellites are aware of the transaction history. They understand what that one particular satellite was tasked to do, and they can take over the activities of that lost satellite or disabled satellite. So we see certain resiliency in having blockchain structures. And we also see immutability, the ability to store this information and ensure that it is not tampered with. It becomes more tamper-proof. So if someone wanted to cyber attack a particular satellite and change information, the information on those satellites are quite resilient to change because of the immutability of blockchain.
Is the military using a different blockchain technology?
They're most likely not using proof of work. They're perhaps using proof of authority or proof of stake. But for the military, they would be using some form of a permissioned ledger because this is not something that is open to the public.
Have you talked to Elon Musk and Starlink? We went over and looked at the facility. It's very interesting to know how those satellites will communicate if something happens. Have you looked at that?
I have not personally spoken to Elon Musk, but I am going up on his Falcon 9 rocket this October. So we indirectly do work with each other. We're really one of 4 or 5 companies that are introducing blockchain networks in space. So we are certainly of a new era of companies that will bring this technology to test.
Well, best of luck when you go up. Let us know how it works out.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, all right, so a couple of things there. Mainly, this starts to maybe flow into defense spending. Now, this actually would be bad, only because the amount of people within the DC engine that are very pro-defense spending, hence the military-industrial complex. So I don't know that that is necessarily going to be a great advantage, but at least they're starting to explain that there are other countries out there that could be utilizing this technology to essentially one-up us. And that's the more important thing that I think will get Congress and the Senate's attention. Let's go into how small business and supply chain could benefit from this as well.
And when we think about blockchains, I'd like to know how this will help small businesses like construction companies and mom and pop grocery stores and stores, for example.
At MIT, we look at supply chains a lot using a tool called the Beer Project. It's a beer game. It has nothing to do with drinking beer, but it tracks a beer supply chain. And what you find out over the simulation is that if you change the demand at the consumer level just once, all of the other players in the supply chain will become very confused. They will oversupply, they will under-request, and this is simply because information is not openly shared. Now, this is something blockchain could alleviate very easily by simply having everyone in the supply chain tied to this common ledger, and they can see for themselves what the demands are and what everyone is requesting against that demand. So I think that would tremendously help small businesses to really make sure their margins are good, make sure they're ordering properly.
I think when a lot of these companies are having to go through a very cumbersome process of all of the work that needs to be done to launch in a Web 2 environment, whether it's thinking about cloud infrastructure and some of the other things, Web 3 and blockchains make it much easier for anybody to get on, and the cost being very low. You know, when we talk about a smart contract being deployed on the Polygon protocol, it can sometimes cost pennies to do. And so I think the cost efficiency is a really big deal for small developers and in small companies and keeping costs down.
Right, and the cost benefit could be enormous.
Absolutely.
Yes, okay. And obviously food supply is a big issue in our country. Walmart has already established a blockchain partnership with Kroger, Nestle, IBM, and Dole to bolster their food traceability. Sweetgreen, or salad restaurant, has used blockchains to trace the origins of the produce that it buys. In an era where consumers are increasingly concerned about the origins of safety of their food, blockchains can offer an unprecedented level of transparency and resiliency for agriculture-based supply chains.
All right, so that's a big benefit. It's also something that many companies have been working on for quite some time in terms of the supply chain side of things. And obviously, Ryan Wyatt, who was talking about smart contracts and the deployment and really ramping up from 2 to 3, Web 2 to 3, I think is a big part of this. And if you're brand new to blockchain, or maybe this is the first time you've ever watched a video about, how tokens work, how NFTs work, understand that this new technology is already in place. It's already operating out there. There's a lot of major companies already utilizing this type of technology. And it's really just getting to the point where the tech has moved faster than the regulation. I think that's the problem that everybody's really facing. Even if you look at some of the things we've covered on our own network, this was a video we did not too long ago on the NFT Wine Club scenario. But again, this was going back to how wine is being produced, creating NFTs to create not only the provenance of that wine, but also collectability. That's one of the scenarios that plays into this. Same thing will happen. They were talking about Sweetgreen. They were talking about different sorts of retail food suppliers, including Walmart, Kroger, et cetera. All those utilizing blockchain. Eventually, smart contracts and zero proof will be a big part of how all of this kind of deploys into the next level. Don't worry about how it works. What you have to understand is we need to get there from a technology standpoint in really being able to go to the next level. And I think that's what this hearing was really focusing on. Let's go to clip 6, which talks about consumer alerts.
You noted an example of mortgage alerts, which you see this as being applied to a compliance mechanism when a company changes its privacy policies to alert users. Would you speak more about smart contracts?
In the context of privacy policies, for example, I think your question, Chairwoman, speaks to whether it could be used as an alert system to indicate to the FTC that a company has changed their privacy policy. I do think that could be an area looking back to when is a good use case for blockchain technology where the FTC doesn't necessarily trust privacy policy compliance of the corporations. The users don't always know when the privacy policies have been updated, or even when they push I agree, they didn't really realize what they did, right? They didn't read it. Certainly this could be used to alert folks that it has happened.
Great, and you mentioned the alerts to the FTC, but it'd also be the alerts to the individual when the privacy contract is being changed, because.
All right, so push protocol is a good example of this. This is a communication protocol really for Web3 and the evolution, obviously Polygon being part of this component right here. But the ability to kind of add that to it, again, this just only gets into more use cases for general lawmakers to really kind of understand the value of this technology going forward. Let's go over to clip 7, which gets into the gaming side of things, sports, etc.
But how do you envision blockchain changing the future of gaming and even going so far as, like, say, the metaverse?
I think what this allows people to do is, instead of just licensing this from the publisher, they can now own it. If you spend money on something, you deserve to own it. You don't just license the sweatshirt from Nike. You buy it, it's yours. You can give it to me, you can trade it to me, you can sell it to me. I think that's really important. And so these digital goods deserve more rights. People are spending a lot of money on it. They deserve more autonomy on how these things can be used. There is no better way to solve for that than putting these on open blockchain protocols.
We could potentially see a case where a student athlete uses their NIL to create a digital sports collectible through NFTs. So, Mr. Wyatt, how are you seeing NFTs being used by athletes in the digital sports collectible space?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I mean, even Nike is a participation in the space, so I think it is good for athletes that are moving forward. One way is a way for them to uniquely offer opportunities to their community and fans. And so what we're seeing right now is people are using almost NFTs like a membership pass. So people can come in, they understand that there is a finite amount of them, it's access, and then the athletes can use them to do whatever they want, whether it's meet and greets, they want to do autograph signings. There's a lot of different opportunities for them, but it really clarifies when somebody buys this NFT membership what they're getting from that athlete, and now it's opened up a whole new monetization stream for them. Because these blockchains are open protocols and public goods for everyone, anybody can deploy. So it's great for athletes to be able to really start to think about it in a unique opportunity with NIL as well.
All right, so I know that was complex in the sense of, when you look at how sports could engage on this. This is a tweet stream that might explain it a little bit easier. Step 1, Nike sold 97,000 .swoosh. This was the Air Force One boxes. They were built on Polygon. This was a digital asset, so it basically gave you, the Air Force One shoes later. Their latest announcement says that future EA Sports games will integrate directly into swoosh items. Although the detail are yet to be laid out, they're still working on that. But the point is that now you're going to see these digital assets start to drop into these games. Obviously, you see Madden there, FIFA 2023, etc. Step 3, as with any games customization, it's a big part of the experience. Gamers love to dress their players. Now you've got the chance of an NFT, boom, actually dropping into the game itself. So this is where it gets interesting, I think, in the sense of use case, especially in sporting. And then step 4, this is kind of the Trojan horse. Gamers will see the new outfits in the game without actually knowing that they are NFTs, because right now that's the problem with the gamers, is they're not really understanding how NFTs work. But you can see the flow of how digital assets, IP, intellectual property, as well as licensing starts to flow into this. This is really a new technology structure of how all of this could work in the future. So any kind of entertainment, etc., from Disney all the way to Hollywood, sports, as well as just the assets that we'll see within the IP layer are going to move to this. So this is a very, very big part of this. Now, don't forget, you got Nike and EA Sports all teaming up on this at the same time. Now, let's get into a little bit about the energy consumption, because this is where usually things get off the track and people start to lose focus. But listen in.
What would you say to those who are concerned about energy consumption?
Congresswoman, I would like to weigh in here. Polygon Labs is a blockchain software company. We are incredibly passionate about this topic. It's worth noting that 19 of the top 20 protocols are proof of stake and not proof of work, which means they are not as energy intensive. And in fact, Polygon Labs ensures that we remain carbon neutral. It's a big part of our mission. We report third-party audits with maintaining that integrity. And I think this is something that a lot of people that are building in this space are quite passionate and care deeply about.
I'd like just to add to that, we all started with the Bitcoin blockchain, which used proof of work, very energy intensive, and in some countries, the largest amount of spend is actually on energy due to Bitcoin mining. So obviously that's unacceptable and unsustainable. But as a global society, we are evolving from that. We're moving to proof of stake. We're moving to proof of authority. Other consensus models that do not use that type of energy. And certainly, as we're applying blockchains into space, it would be impractical to have proof of work that's so energy intensive, weighing down satellites. It would drain the batteries of those satellites very quickly.
Protocols that use proof of work versus protocols that use proof of stake have different technological architecture value propositions, right? So Bitcoin blockchain is very focused on the security and integrity of the blockchain itself, and proof of work is viewed to maximize the security of the protocol, versus proof of stake values throughput and scalability, right? And so it's not only about energy consumption, but it's also a technical architecture choice that is made given the value and proposition of that particular protocol.
This is happening, and Ryan mentioned dozens of protocols that are already out there doing this. And even if you look at Solana, they've got the website Solana Climate, total footprint overview, the number of nodes, et cetera, and then all the way down to a comparison of what kind of other things are potentially out there in creating energy consumption. If you think about it, nobody else is really doing this. Not the banking industry, not search, not technology of any sort, airlines, you name it. They're actually going out and looking at ways to actually showcase this because it's been a nail that has been often tried to use to put in the coffin of blockchain. And I think now people are starting to get the picture. All right, so let's go to our next clip real quick around protecting children.
In your opinion, would you agree that blockchain technologies offer some advantages to scammers? And why do you think that scammers are making so much use of this technology?
I don't know necessarily that blockchain technology offers particular advantages to scammers. I think many of the scams that take place in the blockchain industry are simply echoes of traditional scams. Promising money that doesn't exist, taking your money to use it for one thing and using it for something else entirely. I think what makes it so attractive at the moment to scammers is the same kind of thing that got people in trouble in the early days of the internet: unfamiliarity with the technology on a wide scale and what the risks are. It's much less likely nowadays to fall for a phishing scam. We have internal processes to learn how to avoid phishing scams and emails, for example, and it'll take time until that same kind of education happens around blockchain technology.
Do you believe that consumers, especially vulnerable consumers like children and seniors, have the information that they need to detect and avoid scams relating to blockchain and Web3 or other types of online fraud?
I think a lot more education should be directed towards seniors. I fascinatingly tend to think that children often know more about cryptocurrency and blockchain ecosystems than we might expect. They're more sophisticated in it, I think, increasingly than other populations. But certainly, of course, they always need extra protection.
It is a great point about children versus seniors.
Yeah, the kids. Hopefully, the kids are going to protect the old people here. All right. So, good things here is that I agree. This is something I talk about a lot, and that is these kind of scams have been around forever, and they're still around today. I mean, you get scams in your text messages, your emails, every sort of communication you can imagine. Elaborate social engineering scams. All of these have been done around the almighty dollar, the best, if not the greatest, money laundering system ever created. When you get into blockchain, things start to change up a little bit. And I think this is something that we're going to continue to see in terms of use. Now, let's talk about China, because this is where we get into a little bit where this starts to play into maybe the future here as well. Let's listen to this clip.
Where's China or the CCP in their line of development of blockchain? Do you have any idea?
If China continues to be the first mover in this space and innovating, they're going to do it in the wrong way, in a way that's not conducive for our country.
Kind of like AI.
Exactly. And so I think for us, and they're going to do it in a way that doesn't respect the spirit of blockchains, of being open and transparent and decentralized.
Yeah.
So I can't stress enough how critical it is that I think this will be the most important year for us.
All right, so Ryan hit it right there. He can't stress this. This is the most important year. 2023-24 is going to be critical. You've got Hong Kong right here. Crypto rules now offer a level playing field around investor protection. This is just an example of how Hong Kong, obviously with China, is going into new crypto rules. It's going to offer up a whole new layer of investor opportunities within it. And it does get to the point that Ryan's saying, and that is, there could be a lot of pitfalls that come out of China. No, maybe not, but there could be. If you look at their history of how they've done and controlled their population, this could also play into it. So the United States is really in arrears here of trying to get this done. So it's going to be pretty big. Now, that's not the only threat. Let's go to the next one. Let's talk about AI now.
Is there a role for blockchain when it comes to potentially neutralizing some of the, what could be the negative impacts of artificial intelligence?
Verifying source materials. So we see people producing fake images that can move markets or change people's minds. I think it'll be really important for us to be able to look and say, is that a verifiable image that's from the New York Times or not, or is it manipulated? And I think lastly, it could be incredibly helpful for efficient code auditing. So I think these work.
All right, so Ryan's right there as well, is that if you think about deep fakes, the ability of AI right now, if you just look at Adobe, if you're a designer, the amount of advancements that Adobe has made already within the use case of AI image generation, all of these kind of things are only going to amp up. Blockchain is a potential solution technology here that could create authenticity around this and proof of work. So this is going to be interesting how it plays out. All right, so let's go into this next clip, clip 12. This is just more around regulation and how they should do it.
Professor Reyes, where do you think through funding and incentivizing we could advance blockchain in America?
I think it would be excellent to have a funded education program for lawmakers and regulators, because the nuance really does matter. And all the regulatory clarity we all have been asking for depends on understanding the difference between the financial use cases and the non-financial use cases.
But if you take a look at how we treated the internet in its early days, we were fairly hands-off to allow it to innovate. And I think that's very important for the blockchain to continue to do that. Let's keep in mind that the blockchain is only about 15 years old. It's a teenager. Let it be a teenager, and let it come to some degree of maturity before we talk about huge regulations. Having said that, though, there are industry-specific standards that we have to take a look at, things like healthcare, where HIPAA laws are in place, and the privacy of our data is very critical. So we need to look at this on an industry-by-industry basis to see how blockchains are being used, and whether or not, from an industry perspective, we need to put some guardrails on how blockchains could potentially threaten our information, our lives.
What I think would be a detriment to the United States legal system is if laws targeted the technology or the software itself and said, the blockchain must look like this, and you may only build a protocol with these features. That would not be helpful. I also concur with Mr. Schumann's earlier remarks that targeting the developers themselves, particularly open source developers, is not particularly helpful. Particularly recognizing that blockchain protocols are not the only open source software that we rely upon on a daily basis. If you use a computer today, it's likely that you used some piece of open source software.
All right, so again, hitting on all this in terms of regulatory scenarios that play onto this. And of course, timing is very interesting. You have Polygon now failing to rebound after pretty much being labeled as security by the SEC, going after Coinbase, Binance, etc., and also a litany of top-level tokens now being listed or accused to be security. So again, this goes right into timing here is very interesting of how this hearing took place. Ryan was there in DC, and of course all of what Gary Gensler has been doing. All right, so let's go into this, because there's a couple of things here that kind of play into this further. And this was from Eleanor Terra. This is the Fox crypto reporter out there. Let me kind of zoom in on that for you guys. And this was Gensler, who was at a meeting with Binance in 2018, a year before he allegedly offered to serve as an advisor to the crypto company in 2019. This is getting very interesting with Gensler. I still don't understand this completely as to why he's making these steps, knowing that he's got all of this out there. There's some bizarre things. There's going to be an interesting play out on this for sure. The other thing that's playing into this came from Moran over at Crypto Banter. SEC is playing a very smart against Coinbase. They have an unfair advantage. They're pushing Coinbase into a huge legal fees, same time reducing tokens. They can trade on platform and choking the ramps to hurt the Coinbase revenues. Listen, I don't think the legal fees are going to be, they're going to be grand, but for the amount of money that Coinbase has to play into this, I think that this will be a limited amount. The bigger picture here is this right here. This is the estimated number of crypto users worldwide, and this is 22 versus 23. All right, and you can kind of see it. Pretty amazing in the sense that Asia has now become one of the largest countries out there, moving into more growth in the blockchain space, and more importantly, crypto users and investors. So again, this is Asia. I talked about this quite a bit on some of our shows, is that Asia is becoming the new epicenter of how blockchain and maybe the future of investing is done. Make sure to stick around here, guys. We're going to be doing plenty of these kinds of wrap-ups, especially on things around the hearings, trying to decipher how regulation, but also how this technology is going to be moving forward in the future. If you're not a subscriber, just hit that subscribe button right now. It'll also give you the opportunity to get notifications when we go live or we do a premiere. Hit that little bell, you'll get notified. It's very easy. If you're not part of our Diamond Circle, also get in on that. It's very simple. Click the link down below. You can join. It's free, and we give you additional content, podcasts, all sorts of additional stuff that you can catch via our email. And if you're not catching me out there on Twitter, it's @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.